Good evening, students. Today we going to analyze the economic environment in India in the chapter business environment. This is the third chapter, and after the discuss made a detailed discuss over various dimensions of business environment. Now we come on the point to discuss economic environment of India. To define the economic environment of India, first of all, we have to see that in which stage India's economic development. There are several stages of India's economic development. Like first stage of economic development. Stage of economic development. Every economy goes through 5 stages of economic development. The first is traditional society stage, the second is precondition of take-up stage, and third stage is take-up stage. After that, mass consumption stage, and at last, fifth stage of economic development is maturity stage. In the point of view of stage of economic development, India is in take-off stage, because in 80s India is in precondition of take-off stage. So after globalization, now India is in take-off stage. Take-off stage refers that stage in which an economy accelerate their developmental programs, their policies were very developing, and most of economic indicator get a suitable place. Second is economic structure. As we know that there were 3 types of economic structure, capitalistic economy and socialistic economy, but India is a mixed economy. It means that Indian economy is the mixture of capitalistic economy and socialistic economy. So in India there were coexistence of public sector and private sector, and both work together for India's developmental process, and they also contribute in India's developing process. Third, economic policies of the government, such as monetary and fiscal policies. In point of view, India's economic policy is quite better in comparison of other Asian countries, because Indian monetary policy and fiscal policy, which is regulated and controlled by government of India, is quite developing policies towards Indian economy, and they are very rational policies, and decisions were taken under these monetary and fiscal policies. So from the point of view of monetary and fiscal policy, India's economic environment is good. Fourth, economic plannings and 5-year plans. As we know that for economic development, every country or economy assume some plannings, and in Russia there were 10-year plans. In various countries there were different types of economic planning, and in India also adopted, Indian economy adopted the 5-year plannings of development, which is quite better for the developing economy like India, because no long-term plan get so successful in Indian economy. So 5-year plans were enough to regulate the developmental process, and also good for economy. Fifth, economic aggregates like GNP and GDP etc. GNP or GDP is the indicator of economic development, and GNP and GDP from the point of view of Indian economy, because Indian economy is agro-based economy and rural economy, thus the major contribution which is made by agriculture sector, but due to structural changes, that major contribution will get shift gradually from agriculture sector to service sector, and nowadays India GDP were much better in other its neighbor countries, in comparison of its neighbor countries, and the service sector is the most contributing sector in GDP. And from this point of view, India is a global IT leader, and the service sector is very good. Agriculture sector also sustain its contribution towards economic development. Thus, GNP and GDP indicator is good enough for business environment in India. Next is infrastructural factors like banking, transportation, communication, power, energy, etc. As we know that infrastructure is defined as a catalyst towards economy's development, and in this point of view, India's infrastructure nowadays, there were metro railways, bullet trains, global IT leader in communication, transportation, and banking system, digital India. The overall infrastructure became so good that India now can facilitate any business organization on the basis of world level, and global companies also can operate in Indian economy because from infrastructure point of view it is very good. Now it is the sixth point on which we are going to compare or define the economic environment of an economy, and on the basis of this sixth point we find that Indian economic environment or business environment is much better rather than any Asian countries except China. But nowadays from China the companies were try to move from China and get set in India. So now next point, the feature of Indian economy at the time of independence. Now we have to describe the features of Indian economy at the time of independence. At the time of independence, the feature of Indian economy was not so good because India is rural. At the time of independence, India is a rural-based agro-economy in which about 70% population depends upon agriculture for their livelihood, directly or indirectly they depends upon. And GDP, in GDP, agriculture sector much contribute rather than any other sector. 85% of population lived in villages and also depends upon agriculture, farm activities, and very little few non-farm activities in rural areas. And the whole production scenario and production process were crushed in lower productivity and low production technology. In agriculture and industrial sector also there were use of backward technology at the independence time, and due to this the GDP is very little bit of Indian economy, and due to illiteracy, high birth rate, due to lack of awareness and lack of health facilities, there were increment of communicable diseases which are widespread, and it is a big obstacle in the way of economic development of a nation at that time. So now we find that Indian economy infrastructure or features of Indian economy at the time of independence were not so good, but gradually India tried to for development, and now it's get a good economic situation or business environment situation, especially after globalization. Indian economy moved faster in comparison of world economy, and nowadays it's going to be integrate with world economy and coordinate with the world economy itself, and it's also get benefited from globalization process. In next video, we are going to describe the impact of LPG policy on Indian economy, and how LPG, we also see that how LPG policy changed the business environment of Indian economy. Till then, you have to make the notes of this topic in your homework book, and also remember this. Okay.